Excuse me, can you tell us what's going on today, please?
We've just heard that there's been a shooting, and 12 or more kids have been shot and killed, and there's about 9 injured or something like that.
And how do you feel? What's your reaction to that?
It's pretty bad. My friend's mum has been involved because she's a teacher there. It's just awful what's happened.
The Dunblane school massacre was a school shooting that took place on March the 13th, 1996, in the small Scottish town of Dunblane. A gunman invaded Dunblane School and shot to death 16 young children and their teacher before killing himself. It remains the deadliest shooting in Great Britain. A general outline of the day's activities proceeds as follows. The gunman, Thomas Hamilton, lived in the town of Dunblane. On the day of the massacre, he drove into the school parking lot at about 9:30 in the morning. He cut the cables on a telephone pole and then entered the school, carrying 4 handguns and 743 rounds of ammunition. He was wearing shooting earmuffs. He fired a couple of shots as he made his way to the school gym, where teacher Gwen Mayer had just taken her 29 Primary 1 students for their PE class. Hamilton entered the gym and immediately opened fire, wounding PE teacher Eileen Harold and teaching assistant Mary Blake. He then injured and killed several children. At this point, Harold and Blake took shelter inside a cupboard in the gym, bringing as many children with them as they could, as Hamilton continued his attack. At this point, an adult and an older student tried to look inside the gym to discover what was going on. Hamilton fired towards them and then left the gym, firing towards the library cloakroom and into a mobile classroom, where the students lay on the floor at their teacher's instruction. At this point, Hamilton then returned to the gym, dropped the gun he had been using and chose another one, which he used to kill himself. The whole attack took place over less than 5 minutes. Mayer and 15 children were killed outright. Later, another child died in the hospital. A further 15 people, most of them children, were wounded. This account you're about to watch is from a child who was present during the shooting and was one of those wounded children. Apologies, this is a clip that contains Piers Morgan.
Amy Adam, who survived the shooting despite being shot twice, joins us now. Amy, welcome to the show. I mean, I find that very, very difficult to watch, even now 20 years on. And I was just reporting on this for a newspaper and covering this awful story. You were right in the middle of what was going on. I mean, you were only 5. You know, I've got a 4-year-old daughter. I can't imagine that your memory is that sharp about exactly what happened. So what do you remember?
I don't actually remember that much of the day. I just sort of remember the outlines. I remember it being really cold and getting ready for PE. So I had my tights on sort of underneath my gym shorts. I remember queuing up to go into the PE hall, and then I don't actually remember him walking in or sort of opening fire or anything. It was all just sort of happened. And then, I don't know, I must have just sort of realised that there wasn't something quite right. I kind of felt a bit strange, it was weird, and it was quite smoky in the room. And I was beside another people, and I was, my PE teacher was actually beside me, and she noticed that we had been wounded, and there was a big gym hall which we kept all the equipment in, so she said to crawl into there, sort of, to, I don't know, save ourselves. Or
you crawled into a cupboard, didn't you, to get away?
Yeah. I must have knew that there was something wrong, because I remember my sort of right leg trailing behind me, so I I kind of knew, but I obviously didn't know I had been shot because when you're 5, you don't really know what that means.
To understand more of why this occurred, we need to understand, or at least get to know, the killer, Thomas Watt Hamilton. Thomas Hamilton was known as Mr. Creepy by those who had met him. He is officially Britain's most notorious mass murderer. He was born on May the 10th, 1952, and he died the day of the shooting, March 13th, 1996. His method of murder was shooting, with 2 9mm Browning HP pistols and 2 Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum revolvers. The subsequent police investigation after the event revealed that Hamilton had loaded his magazines for his Browning with an alternating combination of full metal jacket and hollow point ammunition. It's worth remembering that gun laws, by this point in the UK, had completely changed following the events in Hungerford, which you can find detailed in a previous video in this series. Thomas Hamilton, at the point of his death and of his murders, was an unemployed former shopkeeper and former scout leader. Soon after Thomas Hamilton committed the atrocious act, police recovered a series of letters that dated from the spring of 1992, 4 years prior to the attack, to only 7 days prior to the attack. So a span of 4 years that provided some answers to the question why. Why a 43-year-old loner opened fire on a class of 29 5- and 6-year-olds in a school gym before turning a gun on himself. Needless to say, anyone would be shocked by such an event. I happen to be a father myself of a similarly aged boy, so the idea that anyone could commit this atrocity is completely mystifying to me. And indeed, these letters paint a picture of a man obsessed that he was being persecuted by the authorities. They clearly show that he's mentally ill. He had beef with all sorts of people, the reasons for which will be revealed as I go on. Scout Association officials, Scottish Secretary Michael Forsyth, Central Regional Council Education Authorities, teachers. They also crucially reveal that Hamilton held a grudge against Dunblane Primary School. In 7 letters written to the Scottish Secretary, Michael Forsyth, the killer claims that over the years his reputation had been systematically destroyed and that he had been unfairly branded a pervert with an unhealthy interest in the boys who belonged to his athletics club. He complained bitterly over his treatment by the Scout Association following his dismissal 20 years previously, and he described the effect persistent rumours circulating in Dunblane had had on his life. In one letter dated January the 26th, 1996, Hamilton spelt out his animosity towards the Central Regional Council's education authorities and its teachers, including those at Bannockburn and Dunblane Primary School. He wrote to Dr. Robert Bull, the regional education convener, and he accused teachers of informing pupils and parents that he was a pervert and expressed his anger over the education department's failure to correct the situation. At Dunblane Primary School, he says, where teachers have contaminated all the older boys with this poison, even former cleaners and dinner ladies have been told by teachers at school that I am a pervert. There have been reports at many schools of our boys being rounded up by staff and even warnings given to entire schools by head teachers during assembly. He goes on to complain how such rumours have damaged his clubs, dented his public standing and prevented him from earning a living. He wrote that any attempts to enlighten people had proved time-consuming, expensive and ultimately futile. The problem I've got here, and the problem most of you will have, is that in my opinion there is no smoke without fire. He described photographs he had taken of young boys in his clubs as proper and legitimate. But my question would be why? Why would someone in his position need to take photos at all? He went on to say in one of his many letters, I have no criminal record, nor have I ever been accused by any child, and I am not a pervert. I have always run my clubs in a fair, proper and competent manner and ensured that no child or parent has any proper or legitimate complaint. Nevertheless, this defamation coming from the respected source of local primary school staff has caused untold problems everywhere within the region and beyond. That letter was one of 8 sent in an A5 brown envelope to the local newspaper, the Herald, and identical to those sent to several other newspapers and television stations in Scotland. It was stamped with 2 second-class stamps, and while the postmark is blurred, the frank poignantly reads Mother's Day. The British Mother's Day was celebrated around this time. Contained within the envelope were copies of 2 letters to Michael Forsyth. One written in February bitterly describes how, while inquiries by Central Scotland Police, prompted by the Scout Association, came to nothing, individual officers insisted on sullying Hamilton's reputation. In another letter, he said, in 1988, 2 Dunblane police constables informed Strathclyde Police in confidence that I was a known pervert, which resulted in maximum disruption to my summer camp and damage to my public standing in work. The other letter, written the previous year, is a tirade against the police, who Hamilton describes as overzealous, obsessed with child abuse, and all too keen to attach sinister motives to the activities of the boys' sports clubs. Once again, no smoke without fire comes to mind. In a pleading letter to the Queen in her capacity as patron of the Scout Association, and dated March the 7th, Hamilton outlines his long-standing grudge against the Scout Association for his dismissal 20 years earlier. He points the finger at a colleague who branded him a pervert, but who Hamilton concludes is jealous of his clubs. He ends by saying that he is turning to the Queen as a last resort in an attempt to salvage his self-esteem. In detailed letters sent to the parents of boys who attended his clubs and summer camps, Hamilton resentfully reiterates how a complaint from a Scout official resulted in one of his clubs being banned for 2 years from using facilities at Dunblane High School in 1983. He goes on to tell how he was exonerated by the Ombudsman in 1985 and how Central Regional Council were found to have acted badly and caused injustice. In the letter, dated August 18th, 1995, Hamilton concludes by reassuring parents of his long-term commitment to his supporters in Dunblane. Here is an extract from the letter Hamilton wrote to Dr. Robert Ball, Education Convener, of January 26, 1996. Dear Bob, over 6 months ago, I wrote to you to report that following a discussion among teachers in the staff room at Bannockburn Primary School, teachers were informing pupils and parents that I am a pervert, and as a result, all of the 26 pupils who were members of my Bannockburn Boys Sports Club left immediately and local gossip followed. This situation is not confined to Bannockburn Primary School. At Dunblane Primary School, where teachers have contaminated all of the older boys with this poison, even former cleaners and dinner ladies have been told by teachers at school that I am a pervert. Sincerely, Thomas Hamilton. It's important to remember at this point that no motive has ever officially been announced. But these letters are genuine, and they certainly paint a picture of a man with a few axes to grind. The reaction to the incident was swift. The first call to the police was made at 9:41 a.m. by the headmaster of the school, Ronald Taylor, who had been alerted by assistant headmistress Agnes Olsen to the possibility of a gunman on the school premises. Olsen had told Taylor that she had heard screaming inside the gymnasium and had seen what she thought to be cartridges on the ground. And Taylor had been aware of loud noises which he assumed to have been from builders on site that he had not been informed of. As he was on his way to the gym, the shooting ended, and when he saw what had happened, he ran back to his office and told Deputy Headmistress Fiona Edington to call for ambulances, a call which was made at 9:43 a.m. The first ambulance arrived on the scene at 9:57 a.m. This was 14 minutes after the call. If this seems slow, it's perhaps worth remembering that this is in rural Scotland. Another medical team from Dunblane Health Centre arrived at 10:04 a.m, which included doctors and a nurse who were involved in the initial resuscitation of the injured. Medical teams from the health centres in Doon and Callander arrived shortly after. The accident and emergency department at Stirling Royal Infirmary had also been informed of a major incident involving multiple casualties at 9:48 a.m. and the first of several medical teams from the hospital arrived at 10:15 a.m. Another medical team from the Falkirk and District Royal Infirmary arrived at 10:35 a.m. and by about 11:10 a.m. all of the injured had been taken to Stirling Royal Infirmary for medical treatment, but one child died en route to the hospital. Upon examination, several of the patients were transferred to the District Royal Infirmary in Falkirk and some to the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow. The result of the shooting was catastrophic, and the media interest and the sympathies of the entire United Kingdom were immediately apparent. Not only was the school shooting incredibly shocking, but it was also unheard of in such a peaceful country. The British public were especially shocked by the nature of the shootings and the fact that it involved so many young children.
Very, very shocked, very shocked. I couldn't believe it happened in a town like this. It's a little place.
Just in a state of shock, it seems unreal. I can't even understand anyone doing anything like this.
With the consent of Bob Dylan, the musician Ted Christopher wrote a new verse for Knocking on Heaven's Door in memory of the Dunblane schoolchildren and their teacher. The recording of the revised version of the song, which included brothers and sisters of the victims singing the chorus and Mark Knopfler on guitar, was released on the 9th of December 1996 in the UK and reached number 1. The proceeds went to charities for children. Dunblane still remains the deadliest mass shooting on British soil.
Take this badge off me. I can't use it anymore. It's been too dark to see. Felt like knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. I feel I'm knocking on heaven's door. All these guns have caused too much pain. This town will never be the same. So, for the bands of Dunblane, we ask please, never again. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me down to lie in pastures green. He leads with me the quiet walk.